Hello and welcome, everybody. It's 6 o'clock for the 6 o'clock club once again. Hello from me, Andy from Twisted Narrative, and we've got a fantastic guest. I'm super excited. We've got Charlie here, Charlie Menzies. Well, introduce yourself, sir.
So, hello, I'm Charlie Menzies. I'm the creative lead at Parable Games and the lead designer of Shiver,
Okay.
the spooky horror RPG.
I've got something special here. Watch this. Shiver. So everybody in chat mentions Shiver. Shiver will come up like that, given time. But that is the fantastic sort of logo. I'm super excited. Thank you very, very much for joining us, Charlie.
My pleasure.
Um, I've seen this develop since it didn't exist. I know Charlie through his brother, who's what is Barney's sort of position? Is it co-writer or um,
So Barney helped me a lot with the kind of editor and developer, is what I'd say. So he's helped me balance the rules, kind of throws kind of his creative aura in kind of here and there, and like kind of helped kind of keep things like smooth and balanced
yeah,
um, throughout it, but definitely kind of has a creative hand in it as well. But in
perfect.
terms of kind of doing the writing, I'm the one who's kind of tapping away furiously at the keyboard.
Absolutely. And that was my first kind of introduction to, oh, my brother is designing a role-playing game, and that was back in the day when we had the shop. Um, so before we get into Shiver itself, we're going to spend most of the stream talking about it. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What are your influences leading up to Shiver? How did you get to the point to I'm going to do a role play game and then it's going to be like Shiver.
So it's a bit of a journey. So my original background like wasn't in games at all. It was actually in film and TV. So I was training up in York to do film and television production. And that's where I discovered role playing games. I started playing it with a group of screenwriters, actors, people who I was working with on my course, and had an absolute hoot with it. But as things kind of got busier and then we graduated, I kind of fell out of touch with kind of role playing as I started moving around the country for work and we all got spread out.
Mm.
Um, but then it had a kind of a funny situation where I won a writing competition that gave me a big Amazon voucher. I was like, you know what? I really miss playing role playing. I'm going to get the D&D books because I didn't actually have them. I think I maybe had like a PDF of the player's guide and got everything I needed, and then kind of took my friends to the Peak District in a yurt and played a game, and got them all into it. And then we kind of started playing online, and then periodically meeting up in person. And I had an absolute blast doing that. So kind of rediscovered it when I was working in the film and TV industry
Yeah.
as a way to kind of stay in contact with people, which was really really nice. Um, but as I was doing that, we had quite an interesting thing where some of my players were dyslexic or dysnumerate, or just found the role playing system we used, which was 5e at the time, a little bit tricky, a little bit tough. And I was finding I was having to do a lot of work behind the scenes to kind of keep the engine running, as it were. And ultimately, what we wanted to do as friends was sit down and basically role play a movie together
Mm.
because that was all of our backgrounds. So I sat down and kind of hacked a rough system together that used symbolic dice to make something that was a lot more cinematic, a bit faster in terms of play, and had a bit more flexibility in terms of what we want to do. So it actually was a homebrew system to begin with. And what happened was, is I went up for Christmas, and you've mentioned my brother Barney already, and we were all gathered together for Christmas, and I had my notebooks with me. And offhand, I knew Barney, and at this time, my brother runs, and he still does, a friendly local gaming
Yeah.
store,
Yeah. Big
Seven
shout
City
out to
Collectibles.
Seven City, indeed.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
So, yeah. But yeah, no, so I knew he'd been to games, and we've been talking a lot more. We kind of found a lot of common ground, I think, as we got older, of that a lot of our hobbies really aligned. And I showed him my notebook, and he kind of was sitting quietly, with like a glass of beer after I kind of did, and he was like reading through. I was just chatting away animatedly about how our RPG sessions and stuff had gone, all the silly things that had happened. Then he closed the notebook and he turned to me and he said, "Well, when do you want to make it?" And I was like, What do you mean?" And he was like, I've not seen anything like this before. I think this would do really, really well. I think we should make this." Um, so it was actually it was Barney who really gave me that push
Yeah.
of like looking at something and being like, "I know you've made this for your friends, but I can see a lot of people who would really enjoy this too. Should we have a whirl at it?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I started ramping up work on it. I eventually left my job in London and I moved up to Nottingham, where I was working at a university for a while. And then whilst doing that, we released the game. And now it has gotten to a point where I've left that job and I now do this full time. This is my job now. Is working on Shiver and designing games, and it's been quite a mad saga,
Journey. Yeah.
really.
I love your description of how it kind of perhaps all started was a group of you and your friends that went to a yurt. I mean, that is the start of a horror movie, is it not? You've got a few
Yeah,
D&D books, so we go together, or let's
yeah.
play. No, I mean that's an amazing story, and I don't know. I mean, you're living the dream, but is this kind of a dream come true? Are you know, you obviously are very much enjoying what you're doing at the
Mm.
moment. Did you see yourself doing this, or have you
I
tumbled into it?
it's a mixture. I think so. So when I was a kid, like growing up, I always wanted to write. Like I think
Hmm.
I've always wanted to kind of tell stories in some way. And I think there's been like quite a long road of like first I wanted to write novels. I still write short stories and
Yeah.
stuff now, but then that kind of develops into me and Barney into like one thing that we all did as a family. So me and my brother and my mum is we watched movies together, and horror movies were definitely kind of a big part of that. She showed us John Carpenter's The Thing, Alien, Predator, like a lot of those kind of big 80s
Yeah.
classics we watched as a family when we were probably a little bit too young. But I have vivid memories of kind of like going to the VHS store and like pulling kind of them kind of off the overly packed
Yeah.
shelves. And I think that's where I kind of got the seed of wanting to go into film. Kind of came from of kind of telling these like big like kind of bombastic stories in a very like visual way because I loved kind of making art as well, and I
Yeah.
still do. I still sketch and illustrate quite regularly. Um, and it kind of just felt like a nice combination of everything. um, and I mean, I still do film bits. I
Yeah.
still kind of freelance for the university, but I think the thing I realized through going through the things is that writing a novel on your own is a very, very solo kind of insular practice that can be very daunting. And film has a whole other host of problems of like you can have all the best ideas in the world, write scripts, get to the edge of getting something made, and then if funding falls through, it just disappears into the ether.
Yeah.
And I think on both ends of the spectrum, I was getting quite frustrated of kind of almost of being kind of either needing to lock myself away in a cabin for a year and write something,
Yeah.
or somehow summon large amounts of funds to actually make something to kind of get into the game, kind of that film and TV can
Yeah.
be at
Yeah.
times. Um, but then in the middle, I kind of started playing around with, well, all of these tales that I wanted to tell, these big bombastic horror movies, I kind of created a way so I could tell those stories and share them with people so they could actually experience them without having to have a huge budget, and without having to kind of go mad, kind of writing a 800-page novel or kind of epic in order
Yeah.
to do it. So kind of it really kind of it was something I had as a hobby kind of for quite a while, but it suddenly just appeared and there was a nice confluence point that made me realize actually this is the way I want to tell stories.
Yeah.
And is actually a very satisfying way for me to tell stories and is a way for me to explore ideas that on both ends of the spectrum
Yeah.
are very difficult or near impossible for me to do. So I think it's very freeing in that sense, and I'd really recommend anyone who has stories where they don't really know exactly where to place them, that actually thinking about putting them in a game
Yeah.
is is potentially where to go.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something interesting there about, role playing. You can do all the special effects without any kind of budget. And in many
Mm,
ways, the mind, the theatre of the mind, or maybe in Shiver's case, the cinema of the mind, is,
mm,
well, it's the best seat in the house, isn't it, really? Because your
mm,
own imagination, prompted by a storyteller and that
mm,
communal sort of storytelling, I don't think there's any better experience to be honest. I think the medium is just simply awesome, and
mm.
uh, I mean, I think before we go any further, we have to also mention that Shiver is award winning as well. So congratulations on that.
Yes, thank you. That was it was quite a shock. I'm not going to lie.
You're
It's the
too
first.
modest, like me. I'm very modest and humble, but you certainly definitely are. No, it was very good. Do you want to tell the audience what award you got?
Yeah, yeah. So we went to our first UK Games Expo in the NEC, and it was the first time I'd actually been to the NEC. And my brother had sorted out all the submissions for the best RPG of the year, submitting it in. And we just before we went, we found out we got shortlisted, and we were up against two Free League titles. So it was Shiver, The One Ring, and Twilight 2000. That's the one.
Yeah,
And we won the People's Choice for Best RPG of the Year,
yeah.
and I was over the moon.
I don't blame you,
uh,
but
yeah.
very much well deserved as well. I'm not just saying that because
Mm,
Free League haven't been here yet, and you
mm,
have, um, but it helps.
mm. It,
No, no, genuinely, I think, and I'm sort of shouting out to everybody. If you've not
mm,
heard of Shiver, check it out. We'll put some links in the website and
mm,
stuff. But
mm.
genuinely deserved that award,
Thank
and
you.
absolutely. Um, so I mean that's a touch about you and how we managed to, or you managed to get Shiver to spring into life
Mm,
from your notes and the like. So I think the next best thing really is to chat a little bit about Shiver and what it is. Let me call up firstly the cover because the cover is amazing. This is the cover of the PDF that I've copied, and it's positioned very nicely between you and me at the moment in the middle. There's that iconic Shiver logo, um, this fantastic artwork that we will come on to more or less in a minute, and then sort of the tagline role playing tales in the strange and unknown. Um, Now, the artwork is in house, really, isn't it? Tell us a little
mm,
about the inspirations and who does the art, and give
yeah.
them a big shout out.
Yeah, so our artist, a big shout out to Ben Alexander, who for the core rule book, the cursed library, and the art book, all of the entire book is illustrated by Ben, just him. It's quite a feat. It's a fun story how we met Ben. So Ben worked with my brother's partner Katie in a marketing agency, and she was talking about what me and my brother are up to. And turned out Ben was a big RPG nut, and he came to one of our play tests locally in Nottingham. And as he was playing, he illustrated his character and things that were going on in the game. We saw his sketches, and they were fantastic. They were amazing. And we had a little chat with him afterwards, and he said he'd be really interested in doing some test pieces for the game, and it just developed from there because we all really got on. Ben's art was amazing, and now Ben kind of works with us full time, doing the illustration for Shiver because I think it's become such a big part of the visual identity of the game
Yeah,
because we worked very hard to find a style because of the nature of what the RPG can kind of do, to kind of get a sense of kind of horror and darkness there, but also so it could work for any time setting, any place, any kind of film that you wanted to adapt.
yeah.
The style had to have that universality to it that could work, which Ben I think just knocks out the park every time.
Mm,
Um,
sorry, just a minute,
mm,
Charlie.
yeah,
Stealthington says, always shout out your artists. And Stuart
mm,
has shouted, beautiful artwork. Yeah, absolutely.
mm,
Artists are important. And
mm,
um, they shouldn't be overlooked, especially in
Mhm.
this day and age. And big
Oh,
kudos to you for
absolutely.
not using AI art. There's a big
Oh,
debate
no.
about that at the
Love.
moment, and we're not here to discuss that. But
Yeah.
just to talk about the cover and to raise a point before
Mm,
we come back to you. Is as you said, it's kind of any time setting, and this cover
mm,
illustrates that just with the single glance so easily. You've got, um, someone with a sword, musketeer or witch hunter or whatever. He's got a back against a sort of American footballer with a fire axe, and then there's some futuristic with a pulse rifle. I would perhaps identify that from a
yeah.
certain movie with xenomorphs
Yeah.
in. Um, um, uh, um, Ian is just trolling me, so he shouted Shiver. So up the logo goes Shiver. Um, and yeah, I mean, it tells you so much in
Mm,
that simple sort of piece of art, and it's outstanding. Yeah, tell me a bit about the influences and like.
mm. Yeah, so in terms of the kind of influences art-wise, there were two real big ones. So me and Ben are both big comic book nerds. Like we love our comic book artists. And there were a few that kind of stood out. The main two I would say are one that everyone I think recognizes quite quickly, which is Mike Mignola for kind of Hellboy. Hellboy's my favorite comic of all time. Hellboy and the BPRD and all of
Yeah,
that is my jam. Love it. But the other side that I think people don't know as much is an artist who I want to get more people onto because his artwork is amazing. Is Francisco Francavilla. So he did Undead Archie. He's done various other comics. Still doing like loads of really great work today, and has that very much that limited color palette, but very bold, very striking, very kind of like deep darks and shadows. An amazing artist, and that's definitely another big influence as well. But there's loads of other artists as well that we pull from. A lot of comic book artists, really, where we were kind of looking. There's like elements of like kind of for kind of like staging characters and exaggerated poses, like with Paul Pope. Is
yeah,
someone who me and Ben kind of really love as well. Um, there's also Andrew McLean who does Headlopper. If there's any Headlopper fans out there, which of that very like kind of seeing how far that is. I think it goes a step further than Shiver in terms of how much you can pare down
yeah,
your detail to just visually show action and framing, and it's yeah, you can kind of sense a theme of that. One of the things that I kind of love about comic books is that to me they feel like movies. In they're almost like extremely kinetic storyboards
yeah,
is the
yeah,
way that I see them, and I also a wonderful prediction from my old screenwriting professor said that like half the stuff I wrote it says like this would be better as a comic book than a film. So and he suggested that that's what I did. So
yeah,
ultimately, I've kind of taken a
yeah,
step of making a game and then getting kind of comic book felt art to display
yeah.
kind of the stories and
I
stuff. But
mean,
yes, a lot of comic book artists.
we
Mm,
really, really, truly never know where things go. I mean,
mm,
you've talked about um, comics being like story versions of a movie. But you look
mm.
at all the movies that are coming out at the moment, and they're literally lifted from
Yeah.
comics as if like this huge kind of sort of back catalogue of Marvel stuff is just basically the storyboards for like the movies and the TV series of Disney Plus. Um, and who knows, at some point we might get Shiver the movie or a movie influenced by it. You just seriously never know. And I like to point out that I was the first one to predict that if it happens.
Yeah.
I won't claim 5% of any revenue though or profit. That's on record as well. So um, no, I mean it's beautiful. So I'm going to make the cover go away. You might all go boo boo, but I'm going to call up the credits now. So not that we're at the end yet. Perhaps we should, like a movie, done the credits here, but this is just so that everybody can actually see. Um, those names in print on screen. Um, so Shiver, a horror RPG, role-playing tales in the strange and unknown, written developed by Charlie Menzies here, and Barney Menzies gets a mention, and then illustrated by Ben Alexander. I would have put that up as you were mentioning names, but I just didn't want to get rid of that glorious
Mm.
artwork. So you've mentioned about the different sort of mechanics of the game, and let's just sort of dip lightly into that.
Mm.
If I remove the credits for the moment, I'll call up the standard character sheet, and this is the character sheet that people can see now from the I suppose core rulebook. Do you want to just quickly talk us through it, if you can sort of remember the sort of layout of it? You've got your sort of abilities
Mm.
and like at the top here.
Absolutely, yeah. So after you've kind of filled out everything, kind of the top where your character is in their image, the main kind of starting point when you're kind of building a character in Shiver is your stat block. So the way that Shiver works, it's a dice pool system, but it uses very unique dice. So it's called the archetype dice system. So it's a brand new system that we designed. And the way that it works is that your top pip, that is your skill pip, that number determines how many d6s that you roll. I realised I'm on video and I have dice with me right here, so I can actually
I can
physically
also call.
demonstrate.
I've copied
Yeah.
the dice
Mm.
illustration here, and I
Oh,
can.
fantastic.
But yeah,
Yeah.
feel free to explain the dice. I will. I'm going to disappear for a moment behind the character sheet.
Okay.
I'm not actually going to disappear. I just people can't see my ugly face. And so you've basically now you've got the character sheet up, and you've got
Mm,
the drawing of the dice,
mm,
where you can re-represent it with a D6 or a D8 from the core rulebook.
mm.
If you remember
Yeah.
that illustration.
Yes. Yes, I do. So yes, so the way that it works is that for each side of our d6 dice, which we call a skill die, we have a symbol, a unique one, on every single side to represent the 6 core skills that exist in Shiver. So these are broad analogs to things that you would find in other RPGs, as well as some that feels a bit more unique to the game. So first up, you've got grit, which is kind of our analog for like strength, toughness, and kind of vitality. So it's all about dealing kind of like physical, like blunt damage as well as resisting damage. You've got wit, which is a little blue key. So all of these are color coded and have their unique symbols. Which is this is dexterity and kind of agility, but it's like the agility of your kind of mind as well as your body. So it's moving quickly, picking locks, but also reacting when a trap is triggered and getting out of the way and dodging. So it has like certain kind of other elements there as well. Then have smarts, you can think good, you can investigate, you can puzzle your way through sciency based weapons and other sort of things with that. We have heart, which doesn't show up on the camera very well. It's a basically red rose kind of shattered up, which you'll probably see on the
Number
character sheet.
4 on the illustration there.
Yeah, so the way this is kind of our analog for like charisma, but both sides of the coin. So it's like you can charm, you can intimidate, you can lie, you can cheat. Quite often the negatives pop up more than the positive in the game of Shiver, which always makes me chuckle. So now we kind of get into the two that I think are a lot more unique for Shiver in terms of how they work and kind of what they mean. So we have luck, first off, because what horror movie can be survived without a good, healthy dose of luck, of just making sure that your hiding spot just so happens to not be searched by the killer. Lightning striking the tree and the tree doesn't fall on you. The fact that when you veer off the road to try and not hit a deer that's jumped in a way that you don't screech into a tree. Luck actually pops up a lot in these kind of stories
Yeah.
in various different ways. It's one that when we were testing, people tried to dump stat early and then very quickly realized that luck is actually very, very important. And finally, the symbol that we use to kind of represent the game, as well as the kind of word mark, is strange. So this is anything that crosses the line of the kind of normal world. So this can be anything from levitating a chair of your mind and giving yourself a nosebleed, changing into a werewolf, using dark magic. But one of the other checks that it all revolves around with is fear. So strange is what you need to roll when you're resisting fear.
Mm.
Um, so those are the 6 skills that are represented by those pips. our different character archetypes give you different levels of things that you're stronger in, things that you're weaker in. Um, and that determines so if I asked for a grit check, so you wanted to kick down a door, you'd look at your pip, see how many dice you've got, and then roll that number of dice. Some of you will be noticing though that there is a secondary pip underneath, and that's for a talent die. If you're talented in something and you're good at it, then you can use one of these. The weight towards success is much higher. With these, we have these little star symbols, which are a universal success for everything that isn't strange. There is also strange present on the dice, and there is the possibility for double strange, but there is also the possibility for double success as well. So these dice are quite powerful, quite spicy, and can kind of swing the game in very interesting ways. Either way. So that's in a nutshell. And when you're rolling your dice, so say you're doing a grit check, it's very very simple. So say we'll use the kick down the door as an example again. So that would be probably a grit check. It's using kind of physical might. You're trying to blast your way through a door. You'd roll your dice, and you'd be looking for the grit symbols. And the harder the door, the harder the challenge, the more symbols you would need. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's how we determine success. But the nice thing about the dice and the symbolic nature of the system is that the dice help tell a story. As I've gone through and explained what all the sides mean, for example, say if I rolled that and I rolled 3 dice, I rolled no grit, I absolutely whiffed it, but I rolled 3 smarts, for example. As a director, our version of a games master, I might say to that player, okay, you stub your toe on the door, you take 1 blunt damage, and as you're hopping around, howling in pain, um, your investigatory brain kicks in and you notice something, like you notice like some other element. Perhaps it's a hidden keypad that you can hack, there's a key hidden under the mat, something that allows the story to move forward in a different way to how the player expected, but allows things to kind of still have momentum, because it's my attempt to try and solve the eternal problem of doors, that occurs where people will sit around. I want to lockpick the door, roll, fail, and then everybody gets their thieves' tools out. Everybody starts rolling until either the somebody rolls a success, the game master gives up, on one or two sides of just saying you can get in, or the door is impenetrable. Like please leave it alone and move on. But with these dice, it allows for both sides of the table to improvise and be guided, and have the dice help you tell a story. And that's the aim of it, of every role having consequence and having story attached to it.
Yeah, I love that, especially with the eternal problem of doors, the bane of every GM, DM, storyteller, director, and everybody else. Stuart has just said, love the designs on the dice, easy to figure out at a glance. Absolutely, I think they're the kind of iconic symbols, and again, beautiful. Who designed those? Was it Ben again, or was it
No, so for the Shiver word mark and all the symbols, that's Ryan Walker.
Ryan?
For another person who worked with Ben at the
Yeah.
same company and kind of a friend of ours, he does all of our so the Shiver word mark, all of the symbols, and then for Gothic on next expansion where we've done basically like kind of reskinned dice with more Gothic-y symbols.
Yeah, right.
He's designed all of those as well.
Okay.
He has got a real eye for extremely iconic design,
Yeah.
we feel. That because we went through multiple iterations of these, because the the kind of critique that I've heard about proprietary dice and symbolic dice was something that I kind of really took in when we were designing this.
Hmm.
Of that, my one goal with this is that the dice symbols needed to emotionally and kind of in a story sense evoke something for the player. So as soon as you look at your dice pool and you see a sea of purple and strange symbols, something bad probably happened.
Yeah.
If you see a sea of kind of hearts, you've done something very charismatic.
Yeah.
Grit, you've maybe overcranked it a bit and not known your own strength. There's so many ways of like you, and just seeing that it kind of creates a nice gut reaction, and
Yeah.
that's him. But I think Ryan's designs for the symbols have really, really elevated that to allow that to
Yeah.
be communicated so much faster.
Yeah. I think nailed it. Absolutely. I think they iconic is a word that is thrown around. They are very symbolic, and I think they will become iconic. I mean, some of those symbols I would happily wear as a t-shirt or whatever. I'm sure you've got merch on your website and store that we'll do a shout
Ooh.
out for. And if you haven't, I'll take 5% of that as well, please. Uh, but again, beautiful design. I like the fact that the eye has got the Shiver S in, but also can stand for strange or supernatural. It works in so many different sort of aspects. I genuinely think it's incredibly well thought out, incredibly well designed, and it's beautiful. And I don't say that about many things. Um, so big thumbs up to you again. I sound like I'm being far too kind. I should get some difficult questions for you to answer. Okay. I bet you haven't got anything in the pipeline or anything just about to be released, have you?
Oh, we do.
Oh,
So
what? That's supposed to be a hard question. And you go, yeah, of course. Oh, well.
so
Tell us about
so
that.
yeah, so in the pipeline, so we've planned quite a few years ahead for Shiver. It's a system that we're very passionate about and really want to keep on supporting, because there's so many horror stories that you can tell. Um, so first up, after we launched the core game, we did a Kickstarter for Shiver Gothic. Gothic horror is probably my first love. Frankenstein, Dracula, probably two of my favorite books ever. And the Universal horror movies really coloured things for me when I was kind of growing up. Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein,
Yeah.
Chef's Kiss,
Yeah,
perfect
yeah.
films. So that's where I really wanted to start, and it was actually again with the whole homebrew element of it. Whilst we were testing elements of the core game, I created my own Gothic world and started playing that with Barney, my friend Ben, and my friend James, as well as our friend Tom as well, who joined us a bit later.
Yeah.
And I kind of wrote this kind of mad story for them to investigate. And when me and Barney sat down and being like, right, first Kickstarter's out of the way, what do we want to do next? And he was like, I think we should do that story because it's really fun. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll if you think so. And we started playing around with that. And that is about now to be released to backers in the next kind of couple of weeks, 3 weeks. In terms of kind of a nice, exciting preview, because they've actually
All right.
arrived. Oh, I could pull them here. So this is
Ooh.
Shiver Gothic. So this is our 10 chapter giant. It's a
It's a
hefty
big
tome. It's about
book.
320 pages of
Yeah.
stuff. So in here, we've also introduced new rules for character creation. So we call them our monstrous archetypes. So if you've ever wanted to play your very own monster squad, your BPRD, see what it's like if you have like a golem, a wolfman, a vampire,
Mummy.
and someone who's made a Faustin bargain, all
Yeah.
working together to solve crimes. This is probably the book for you. Just because I can't help showing it because
No.
I'm very excited for it. This is our special edition
Oh,
of it
that's
as
pretty.
well.
Bring it up properly so we can.
Oh,
That
let
is
me bring
beautiful.
it. So
Oh,
yeah,
it's
so it's kind of
shiny, shiny.
yeah. So it's gold foiled,
Yeah,
kind of like a cloth style binding, with also a leatherette
yeah.
spine
Very
as
nice.
well. So yes, very proud of this.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, so this is our first thing of like doing like continuous stories rather than our cursed library that we had before was more one shots and episodic. But this has introduced a Doom calendar, which allows you to unite Doom clocks and other like kind of the horror mechanics from the core game, and make your stories bigger and even more horrific. And on top of that, we have another smaller expansion, which if you like your rap folk, you like your Skaven, you like your underground subterranean horror, we've got Disciples of Dregstone, which is another 160 page adventure, where you can basically plug this in at a certain point to the main adventure, where have your characters fall underground and discover there is a whole other subterranean city
Yeah.
filled with different creatures and mutants and things, and basically a small revolution that your players get wrapped up in.
Okay.
So yes, so those books have been a real labor of love.
Yeah.
So we're very excited for them to be coming out very
So
soon.
they're coming out. The Kickstarter is finished, and that they'll be coming
Yes,
out, but they'll be available for retail as well from your website.
yeah. in about kind of 3 weeks to a month, I
Hmm.
think. So what we're doing is, as the way we always do things with the Kickstarter, everything gets to backers first in the territory. So once everything is out with our UK backers, it will go to retail in the UK. Once it's into the backers in the US, it will go to
Yeah,
retail in the US, and in Europe the same.
yeah,
But it's looking like the UK stuff. We're hoping to start shipping stuff next week.
very nice.
So then hopefully from next week we'll start to see, and then once we're happy that everything's all of our backers have got their stuff, then we're going to start taking it to conventions.
Yeah.
Our pre-orders will start going out as well from the store, and it will be available just to flat order rather than pre-order from our store.
Okay.
Um,
Before we talk about maybe conventions and other
mm,
things, because that has reminded me about conventions. Just to clarify with Gothic, that big
mm.
version. So does that include Gothic core rules in, and is a campaign storybook, or is it? Do you need the core rules to run Gothic?
So you need the core rules
Yeah,
to run the base game.
yeah,
So everything about kind of combat and the kind of basic maneuvers of the game is all in the core rule
yeah,
book. The everything in Gothic is supplementary. It's add-on.
right,
It's like having extra character classes, but it's a very chunky element. So it's kind of almost, rather than introducing like a subclass for a cleric, for
yeah,
example, it's like introducing a whole other class.
yeah.
Like so,
Because
is what it's doing.
you
Yeah.
run off archetypes, don't you? So I'm guessing
Yes.
it's new
Mhm.
archetypes basically, but it also includes a campaign as well. I got that right. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
which
So
is based on what you did.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's set in a large Gothic city called Spirehome, in a odd kind of a little corner of our kind of fictional world that we're slowly building up called Coranthia, where kind of monsters are still abroad and still roam. So kind of very like 1800s kind of steampunk, like blood and fog is
yeah,
how I tend to like describe it as in a shorthand.
uh-huh.
But yes, so kind of it's an original setting, original kind of story world, with kind of loads of NPCs, and it's a 10 chapter story with kind of big, almost like big chunky individual adventures that all interconnect. But you can kind of like delve into that book. You can play. You can basically set up your own stories in Spire Home. So
Yeah,
there's whole sections of lore. I mean, I can show you in the front bit of the map of the book, because I love a good end paper. So
yeah,
this is the city of Spire Home with all the various locations you can visit and play around with.
very
So,
nice,
so this one was illustrated by me because I love drawing a good map.
very
Um,
nice.
but yes, so yeah, in terms of that, it's kind of it's a mixture of, I didn't want it to be too much of of just a sandbox book,
Yeah,
because I've read those and like they're lovely and they're really fun, and I find them very interesting from a reader's perspective. But if you're not an experienced DM, I think they can be very intimidating
nightmarish.
and nightmarish, of just being like, there's all of this information and you have to somehow weave a story into it. With this, we wanted to provide both. So we provided the rule set to play monsters, then the sandbox to play in, but then a large story, which, just to give people an idea of the length of the story, we were playing that story for over a year and a half, and we still haven't finished it. Is the
Amazing,
thing. I just knew where it was going, and then finished the story. And once things have quietened down, we're planning to gather and do our final chapters
awesome.
together.
Nah,
So yeah, it's a huge amount of stuff for people to sink their teeth into,
yeah.
especially if they're fans of vampiric
Vampire, yeah,
and
absolutely.
gothic. Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to double check sort of all the ins and outs of that, but that sounds very
Mm,
amazing. I kind of run a homebrew city called the
mm,
Smoke, which is
mm,
steampunky gothic, and this just sounds
mm,
perfect addition to that kind of environment. Um, so very quickly, I just want to, you mentioned conventions, and I just want to mention
mm,
conventions because I follow a Shiver and Charlie on
mm.
Twitter, and like every weekend, I didn't know there were so many places. You're all over the place. You have to be like the hardest working sort
Oh,
of, yeah.
it is part of our experiment this year of we did about 8 to 10 conventions, I think, last year.
Yeah,
We had a really good time, and we found that it's a really good way to get out and meet the broader community and just get Shiver on people's radar, because obviously we can shout only so loud
yeah,
with marketing in the site because we're quite a small team compared to something like Wizards or Paizo or Chaosium who have
absolutely.
bigger teams. And we found actually a boots on the ground approach has worked really, really well. So I think now we're going to be doing about 40 conventions this year.
Yeah, no,
So yeah, most of my weekends have gone up in smoke.
yeah, yeah.
But it's all worth it. Like, I think this is the thing of going out and meeting people and sharing the game and getting people excited and running games for people is just it's
100%.
such a joy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sort of back in the day, this is before I even had the shot. I used to go to conventions, and the successful companies were the ones that went to these conventions and reached out. I mean, this is back in the day before kind of internet and streaming and stuff. So the marketplace perhaps has changed a bit, but I genuinely think role players like that interpersonal meeting, touching the product, playing the games, hearing people have fun and feeling that sort of passion really. So I mean, I think it will work for you, but every success,
Mm,
because it's hard work and it's long hours and
mhm.
you know,
Yeah. I think recently I got up at 4:30 to
yeah,
drive to London for a
yeah,
convention. So it's yeah, but it's they're kind of those are the little sacrifices I think you make to
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
make these things work.
It's
Um,
exciting and fun as
mm,
well, but you have to balance that fatigue, don't you? You get there after being up so early,
yeah.
and then you've got to run a game, you've got to
Well,
sell stuff.
it is for some of you, I'm sure you've noticed me just consistently sipping coffee,
Yeah, yeah.
which is that's my secret, is caffeine addiction,
Yeah, I think
basically.
it's
Yeah.
many of ours, but I just wanted to sort of do a shout out there because,
Mm,
yeah, um, not only have you created a great product, but you're doing all of the actual physical hard work to promote it as well. So, big shout out to you again.
oh, thank you.
Um, so let's talk about the Patreon that you've just started
Mm,
up. I think we want to
mm,
shout out about that for you because it's a good way of supporting you and Shiver.
mm. So yeah, if you're interested in Shiver and you're a fan of like kind of having regular content updates and regular stuff to play and kind of sink your teeth into. So we've just launched our Patreon, which has 3 tiers that you can support us on. So our first tier, spooky supporters, I think it's for about $5. Basically gives you a new around kind of like 20-page kind of give or take full adventure that kind of story for Shiver to play every month.
Nice.
So it's kind of part of our new initiative to start exploring new stories, other ideas, interact with our community a lot more, and see the kind of stories that people want to play.
Hmm.
So obviously our big releases take a huge amount of time to kind of prep and get ready. And we found that Patreon, which we've kind of just launched for a month now, is already working in really, really nicely to kind of start peppering in new stories. So, for example, this month in January, in January's release at the end of this month, we'll have a second round of releases. We've got the Hogswallow Horror, which is about a group of peasants going and fighting demon boars that are like plaguing their town, for example. Um, then at our second tier, you get a case file, which is a little shorter but more lore heavy document that kind of links into some of the world building that we've been doing, but also gives you all the tools, all the mechanics to kind of take that and either run a story that we're kind of suggesting and giving you the structural bones for, or spin it off and do your own thing. So January's one, for example, was the Plague Doctor of Derleth Marsh, a ghostly, weird slasher plague doctor that's on a marshland island that gets isolated by the tides. Very kind of woman in black, but with a plague doctor,
Nice.
and a lot of fun. And then our top tier is one I'm kind of having a lot of fun with at the moment. Which is we are experimenting with doing small press stuff. So stuff that isn't Shiver, but if you're a big fan of like horror RPGs, I'm releasing kind of one piece of RPG content that's unique kind of every month.
Oh,
So
nice.
this month, I created a whole new system called Stolen Child because I'm a big fan of Irish kind of Fey folk mythology
Yeah,
about them being gribbly, horrible, and having a propensity for stealing children. And it's inspired by the W.B. Yeats poem as well. And it all uses just a deck of cards, and it's you're taking on different characters from the village, trying to get your children back from horrible, horrible fairies of different kinds. Um, so so if that kind of sounds like your jam, then that's kind of on our top kind of tier. And underneath all of this, there's various other bits as well. We're sharing art process videos. I make spooky ambiences every month as well. That kind of that you can play in your game because I used to be a sound designer,
yeah,
so I do that as a little extra bit as well. And various kind of like posts and in progress bits, as well as a access to a Patreon only channel on our Discord as well. So it's
perfect.
a lot of stuff. We're very, very excited for it and experimenting with stuff all the time. But yeah, if that's something that interests you, then please go over and have a look at Shiver on Patreon.
I mean, it sounds amazing. We will, as always, link all of this into the comment section below. Give me a moment because I will have to get it all and set it up. This live stream will come to an end in a little while, but we will be formatting it as video on demand as well. So if you're not watching now live, and you're watching from the future, all of those links should be in the comments now. So go down and have a look. And whilst we're plugging Shiver, don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe as well if you have liked what we're doing here. But before we go, a couple of other things. First and foremost, we've talked about what you've done, we've talked about what you're doing. Tell us about the future.
So we have just finished a game found. So another crowdfunding campaign that's all fully funded. So we have it was a double feature release. So we're doing Shiver Slasher. So all your favorite kind of movie murderers, kind of from the big screen. You can kind of bring those to life. And then we also have Shiver Blockbuster, which is if you want to get your kids into kind of role playing with a little like dash of horror. They're tales of Spielbergian terror is what I tend to kind of call them. High levels of peril, low levels of gore.
Yeah, yeah.
So kind of like Jurassic Park. We've got a kind of Pirates of the Caribbean inspired adventure, Indiana Jones mixed with Guardians of the Galaxy and various other bits.
Yeah.
With a little with the horror just dialed in a little bit in
Features
places.
minor
Yeah.
peril,
Yes,
as
it's
they say.
yes. Well, and this also features a new writer. I've got to give a big shout out because he's been doing amazing work, and I can't wait for people to see react to his stuff. I mean, he's been releasing stuff on the Patreon as well. Is Adam Holloway. So he's someone I went to university with. We both specialised in screenwriting, and when we sat down to do Blockbuster, um, we were trained on kind of what makes something a 12A. So
Yeah,
basically, we have done exactly the same thing of being like we have made adventures that are firmly a 12A
yeah.
and below for Blockbuster, while Slasher is 18 all the way. So yeah, so he's been having an absolute blast of it, and yes, no, it's we're both very excited for those to
So
be released.
when
Hopefully at the end of this year, I
at the end
think.
of this year, so I
Mhm.
suppose now the crowdfunding is done, does it all just it takes time to go to print and all of that?
Yes, yes. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're doing like kind of final tweaks on all of the plain text, and just making sure and just going through edits and making sure that's as polished as possible.
Mhm.
And then it'll be coming to me, and I'll be doing the layout. So I'll basically start making it into kind of a book and getting it ready for print, and then it goes to the printers, and then obviously and then go through that process, and then getting it shipped everywhere.
Yeah,
So we're hoping end of this year. It could be earlier. If kind of things go kind of well, it's always been there's always a bit of squash and squeeze
yeah,
with these. So we're hoping now because a lot of the things that we kind of planned for was with me not being full time. I'm now full time, so it's kind of things are moving at a bit of a different pace now,
yeah.
which is really nice. And then after that, we do have another release planned which will have announcements later this year.
Ooh.
I have to be careful because I don't think I'm allowed to talk
No,
about them.
no,
So
no. We
Barney might hit me with a stick. So if I mention what it actually is, but yes, but it's all planned, and we have multiple releases
yeah,
planned after that, as well as some discussions of brand new systems that aren't Shiver as
excellent.
well. So those are in talks at the minute too.
Well, once you get the I was going to say permissions, but once you as a company decide that you want to make these announcements,
Yes,
please come back and tell us all about them because
absolutely.
I would love to know, and I'm sure our audience would as well. Stuart has just asked, when do you sleep?
So that was actually a joke about me when I was at university. There was a little writer who's go, Charlie Menzies, when does he sleep? And the answer is sometimes. Like it's no, it's yeah, it's a lot, but I think it very much helps that it's something that I'm extremely passionate about
Yeah,
doing.
no,
I think if it wasn't that, then I don't think I would have the same work balance with sleep that I have
no.
now.
I'm
Mm,
100%
mm.
there with you as well. And let's face it, sleep deprivation is a great inspiration to to open your mind to these madnesses. Um, well, before we genuinely do sign off and say a big thanks to you, we've had discussions about this, me and Charlie. I would very much like you to come and run a game for us of Shiver sometime very soon, and I think I would very much like to do it as an actual play as well.
Mm.
If you are still up for that, and we can gather a couple of extra other players, are you still up for that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I've also been talking to our other writer, Adam.
Hmm.
And we're going to try and organize it so he can be free as well and come
Absolutely.
in because he's a great role player. And also, I'm going to surprise him with a slasher story that he has not played yet.
Oh wow.
So I think so we'll get to see him react to that in for the first time as well. So
Um,
and see if I can murder my other writer as our director. But
no,
yes.
that will be amazing. I think people from Twisted Narrative will be very interested to see me fumble around as a player as well. I am an eternal GM as it is my job. So something doubly exciting. You get to see me make a fool of myself. Well, no, I do that anyway. You'll get to see me play it as a player. You'll get to see Shiver actually run by the writer and designer. Watch out for that. Fairly soon, I think we're going to try and pull that together when Adam is actually free. Um, so yeah, watch out for that, everybody, and shout out. Let's try and get a bit of an audience for it. It will probably be either on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, just so that people are aware, because those are the two free nights that I'm available. And I think we were looking sometime, was it March? Is that
I think so.
ish?
Yeah,
Yeah,
March, around kind of like first half of March. I
yeah, yeah.
think we're trying to aim
So
for. Yeah,
watch out for those details. So without much more to do, I want to say a big thank you to you, Charlie. I really appreciate it. We couldn't have done the stream without you.
well, thank you for
Uh,
having me. It's been a pleasure.
no, it's been amazing to chat and to learn some things that I was not familiar with. I want to say a big thank you to everybody in chat that's joined us. Big thank you if you are, I say this from the future, watching this on video on demand. We really appreciate all of those watches and likes. Please check us out, Twisted Narrative, but more importantly, check out Shiver. I don't think you will be disappointed. It is, well, you've watched a video. I don't really need to say anything else. Just go, buy it. You'll be pleased. So yeah, without further ado, thank you very much. I will be seeing you tomorrow for the 6 o'clock club. In the meantime, have a great evening. See you later, everybody. Look after each other.